For the Honor of Love by Pretty Dynamic. Teela was starting to come to terms with her feelings for Adam. Can she fight her growing attraction for him? Does he feel the same way about her? This is somewhat a sensual approach. Chapter 1. She tossed and turned restlessly in her four-poster bed, her silky auburn hair unbound and flowing on her soft feather pillows, her dainty pink cheeks pressed against the purple pillow she hugged so tightly across her chest. The little wine she drank to help her sleep was not at all helpful to give her a dreamless, peaceful slumber she longed for. Her semi-conscious state were haunted by those piercing blue eyes, the color of the sky in a summer's day, his aristocratic, handsome features that seemed to look more and more disarming each day. She reached out to brush her fingers to his golden mane, as she drowned in his boyish grin that often tugged at her heart. But as her red polished fingers touched him, he vanished, and Teela sat up from bed gasping for air. She looked at her clock and saw it was only 4 a.m. She had 3 hours before it was time to resume her duties as captain of the guards of the royal palace. She sighed and blew a strand of her curly red hair that fell across her face. Curse that Prince Adam. Why is he plaguing my dreams for the last couple of days? We are only friends. He is the crowned prince, and I am nothing but his trainer and protector in the eyes of Eternia. Since it was a warm night, she had foregone her wrap and went straight to Palace Kitchen to get a glass of water. She needed to shake off those dreams about Adam. She had oftentimes reprimanded him that he needed to be more responsible, needed to take his fighting lessons more seriously, and oftentimes he just laughed and didn't mind her scolding and disapproval of his charming but easygoing nature, until that fateful day, a few days back when she was especially hard on him, for she was getting disconcerted with the growing feelings she was developing for him. She tried to stop herself, told herself it was all wrong. He was the prince, and she would only be heading for a heartbreak. But those inexplicable feelings led her to be quite hurtful, and told him why couldn't he fight like He-Man, when he was the crowned prince that should be protecting his planet. She saw the somewhat brief change in the look in his eyes, and then she was surprised that he displayed combat moves and defenses that she'd never seen him use before. He outmaneuvered her and flipped her as though she was not the skillful warrior she was. She ended up flat on her back on the courtyard, with his full weight atop hers as he grinned down at her. "Well, my Captain Teela, does that meet your approval?" With all her strength, she tried to push him away from her, tried to free herself from his embrace, but to her astonishment it was futile. She would have flared up in humiliation at the display of her helplessness in the courtyard, if it weren't for her awareness of the every muscular inch of his form, so intimately pressed against her. She couldn't breathe, not because he was heavy. Surprisingly, he felt ever so gentle against her, but she could feel his breath on her cheeks, and she could see herself in the pool of his blue eyes. She tried to look away, afraid that he would read her feelings in her eyes. She wanted to bite his head off with a retort, but she couldn't come up with any witty remark. "Adam, perhaps Teela has had enough combat training with you for the day." Man-at-Arms's fatherly voice interrupted them, and before either of them could reply, he was directly beside them, his arm outstretched to help her daughter up from the ground. Adam had no choice but to get his weight off Teela. Adam gave Man-at-Arms a boyish grin with a touch of embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Duncan. I must have gotten carried away," he said, as he held out his hand to pull up Teela on her other hand. Teela pulled her weight up as she held his father and Adam's hand. She haughtily brushed off the dust from her legs and her warrior-y outfit. "He just caught me off guard is all." Man-at-Arms smiled at both of them. "Oh, Adam, you really must be careful now. You used to wrestle with Teela a lot when you were just children, but remember you're both grown up now. You're a man of 25 years and you might end up hurting her," he reminded gently. "Don't you worry about me, father. How can he hurt me when I'm a better fighter than he is?" said Teela. She hoped her father couldn't see her flush of embarrassment at having been caught in such an intimate position with Adam. Why was she suddenly reacting to Adam this way? "It's not suddenly. You've been fighting it the 7 years." Suddenly, it was like she was back in the courtyard again. Or was she still dreaming? The next thing she knew, Adam in his pajamas was so close. shaking her shoulders gently as she was leaning on the kitchen cupboard, her furry slippers soaked and the kitchen floor wet. She gasped as she came back to her lady. Adam took the pitcher of water, the overflowing glass of water from her hands, and putting on the table. Teela, Teela, are you okay? You have a faraway look in your eyes. You didn't feel the overflowing water drip on the floor? She felt her face turn crimson as she became aware how soaked her gown was, and it was clinging to her skin. To save her from further embarrassment, Adam immediately took off his pajama top and draped it around her before he took some kitchen towels to wipe the floor. I didn't know you're still awake, uttered Teela. I'm sorry, I must have been sleepwalking. I couldn't sleep. There were things I had to attend to. I heard your bedroom door open and I followed you here. I better talk to Duncan to take some work off your load. You must be working too hard. No, I'm fine, really, protested Teela as she tightened her hold the enormous pajama top that engulfed her. Why do I keep finding you both in such compromising situations? Said Duncan in wry amusement. Father, no, it's not what you think, protested Teela. Man-at-Arms tried to hide his amusement and sound stern. How do you know what I was thinking? You're dressed in Adam's clothes. He is naked. Well, partially naked. I'm dressed beneath, Father. Go to your room. It's almost dawn and the kitchen maids will be up in a few minutes. They can clean up. Without a word, without looking at her father, Teela ran back to her room. Well, Adam, if I don't know you like I do, I would have suspected something illicit going on between you and my daughter. There's none, I assure you, Duncan. She is like a sister to me. I would never compromise her. I will take your word for that, Adam, said Man-at-Arms. Chapter 2. As his battleship reached touchdown with a loud thug that shook his otherwise comfortable seat in front of the jet's control panel, Man-at-Arms sighed in relief as he envisioned a less than precarious undertaking at the Castle Eternia for the coming weeks. He had just arrived from a dangerous mission overseas, of aiding peace talks between two nearby kingdoms amidst warfare. After its success, he was looking forward to being back in Eternia, but as he got off his battleship and walked nearer to the castle courtyard, a sudden sense of dread overcame him as overwhelming clashing of swords and heavy breathing and panting welcomed his return. He poised his sword ready for battle, expecting the worst as he stepped into the place of action. But to his astonishment, he found Adam engaging in sword fight with 20 of the best warriors of their kingdom. For a moment he watched in awe at Adam's excellent swordsmanship, before realizing that Adam never showed his skill before, opting for a ruse of disinterest and lack of skill in fighting. But now he was displaying how he could take all 20 men alone. Adam stopped the moment he saw Man-at-Arms watching their training. "Duncan, you're back!" exclaimed Adam. Man-at-Arms furrowed his brow. "Where is Teela? Isn't she supposed to be teaching you?" Adam indicated that his men are dismissed before joining Men-at-Arms inside the castle. Adam shrugged before taking a drink and handing one to Man-at-Arms as well. "I don't know. I have this feeling Teela's been avoiding me. She hasn't trained me for months, since that day you left, I believe. After that, I didn't see the point of playing down my skill. I don't want those men to eat me alive." He laughed. "Where is she now? I want to talk to her," said Man-at-Arms. "She shouldn't be neglecting her duties. Cut her some slack. Maybe your daughter is just too exhausted." Man-at-Arms raised his voice. "Exhausted? What has she been doing? She knows very well your training is the priority. She can take a break in doing other things, but not protecting and training the crowned prince of Eternia." Adam sighed. "I don't know. I only see her at supper time, and she doesn't stay long enough to take tea and chat." Man-at-Arms shook his head. "I better talk to Teela. What's gotten into her? 2 months I'm gone, and this happens. I never knew you to be remiss of your responsibilities, Teela. I don't want this to happen again. We don't always like what we are assigned to do, but as loyalty to King Randor, we must do what we are supposed to do. Do you understand me?" scolded Man-at-Arms. "I understand, Father," replied Teela in a soft voice. "Now first thing tomorrow you will resume your post as Prince Adam's trainer and bodyguard." Teela nodded solemnly. Man-at-Arms was almost out of the bedroom door when his daughter's soft and hesitant voice spoke to him. Father, may I go to the midsummer ball tomorrow night? I thought it would be a nice change to go to a party. He was surprised, but not angry. His daughter was never the party type. But it would be good for her to hang out with the common people, especially girls her own age. His lips curved into a smile. Why, of course you can. That would be a nice thing for you. But remember, do not forgo your responsibilities as captain of the guards. She jumped into bed the moment her father left her room. She suppressed the angry tears as trying to break free as she hugged her pillow to her chest. I can't do this. I just can't stand being so close to Adam. I'm falling for him. I'm afraid that with one look into my eyes, he would know how much I love him. Get a hold of yourself, Teela. At least you can go to the ball and have fun tomorrow night. It will help you take your mind off Adam. Teela hardly slept a wink the night before. She was mad at her father for forcing her to continue training Adam. From what she heard from whisperers around the castle, he was doing well without her help. She wanted to move on to other things, distance herself from Adam, since she knew very well, if she nurtured her feelings, she will be in for a heartache. The princess from the nearby kingdom of Avalon was scheduled for a visit, but she knew it was not some ordinary courtesy visit. It was business. King Mordred of Avalon and King Randor were discussing a strong alliance between the two kingdoms, and what better way can they secure their alliance but by marriage between their kingdoms? She heaved a sigh and ran her fingers through her long red hair as she stood in the middle of the courtyard waiting for Adam. She couldn't find her golden headgear that kept her hair in place, preventing it from falling all over her face. She could have sworn it was just on her dresser before she dressed up that morning, but by the time she went back to her room it was gone. Oh well, I guess I would have to learn to live without it for the meantime. I'll look for it later. Where is Adam? As usual, he is late for his training. Teela yelped in surprise as strong large hands covered her and whispered in a deep spine-tingling voice, "Guess who?" She covered her dainty hands over his large ones, trying to take it off her eyes. Her heart skipped a beat at the warm feeling of his skin beneath her hands, but she tried not to show it. "Adam, it's about time you showed up," she scolded. Adam took out his hands over her eyes. She turned back to face him with a glaring look, but his wide grin was infectious, and she couldn't help but giggle. "Ooh, I love the hair," he teased as he brushed his fingers through it. Now her heartbeat did a double beat. "Cut it out, Adam!" She tried to snap, but it came out a faltering voice. "Are you all ready for me, Teela?" he asked with a boyish twinkle in his eyes, swinging his sword playfully. Oh, she knew it was nothing but a question, but why did it sound differently to her? "Stop it, Teela," she scolded herself. "Oh, I'm all set. I heard you've been doing very well while I was, busy. Well, you can prove it to me now, if you're anywhere as good as they all claim you to be." Adam was still grinning at the fiery lady warrior in front of her, but before he could breathe, her sword was already coming towards him. He managed to duck only at a nick of time, but the tip of her sword slashed the sleeve of his new dress shirt. He wasn't angry. He was never angry at Teela. Her friend had always fascinated him. In fact, no other woman could make him feel the way she does. She didn't have to do anything to catch his attention. Just here, mere presence makes him lose all sanity. But being crowned prince, he knew how to carry himself well. He never wore his feelings on his sleeve, and never let anything cloud his judgment. Albeit he couldn't help but indulge in bantering and teasing Teela occasionally. He looked into her blue-green eyes and saw the fire in them. For a moment he thought of falling on the ground in pain, just to have her take care of him. But that would be too obvious. There wasn't even a scratch on his arm yet. No, he would play it a bit longer before falling in defeat. Besides, she looked so beautiful, with her auburn locks unbound and caressed by sunshine and touched by the gentle breeze. Not long into their arduous duel when Adam didn't have to feign losing as he usually does. Distracted by her hair falling all over the place, Teela flipped her head, pushing her hair away from her face, trickles of water sliding down the side of her face and her lips moist from her constant licking. Never had Adam seen anything so sensuous that he didn't notice Teela's sword swinging in his direction, causing him to trip and fall back. He didn't mind actually losing, as he had a good view of Teela hovering over him. He had to stop himself from actually getting up and kissing her, as he drowned his fingers on her thick auburn locks. Before any one of them could move, the voice of Man-at-Arms rang out from watching them a couple of yards away. As though caught red-handed in something they shouldn't be doing, both were immediately up on their feet in an instant. See what lack of your training did to Prince Adam? He lost sooner than he usually does. Now, I want you to take some rest, Teela. Sleep early tonight, so you can do some rigorous training tomorrow to catch up. There will be visitors from Avalon soon, and we don't want Prince Adam to lose face, do we? Said Men-at-Arms firmly. But father, tonight is the ball. She began to protest. You can go to another ball, after you have prepared Prince Adam for the visit of King and Queen of Avalon. Teela suppressed her anger, her face almost as red as her hair, as she furiously walked away from the courtyard. Adam was silently grinning when Orko fell beside him. Why do you always pretend to lose over Teela? I can't understand why Man-at-Arms never reprimanded you for it. You're making Teela work twice as hard, scolded Orko. Come on, Orko. How else can we spend a lot of time together? If she thinks I needed her protection and her help in sword fight, she would always be here by my side. Besides, it's good practice for both of us. And for your information, I did lose this round. Oh yeah? Replied Orko skeptically. Sounds like love to me. Orko and Adam looked at the floating eccentric witch on a broomstick above them, hugging herself and blinking her eyes in a dreamy sigh. Madam Raz, what are you doing here? Where's Adora? Is my sister with you? Asked Adam in a delightful surprise. Oh, she's here. In fact, everyone is here. We have some pressing business with your father and mother. I just got here ahead, losing control over my broom. She explained. Chapter 3. Teela stormed out of the courtyard in anger. She stormed out without any definite direction to go to, until her anger and frustration slowly brought her into the woods, as she walked aimlessly away from the castle. She was so deep in thought, cursing under her breath and kicking every little pebble that came across her way, not realizing she'd been walking for a while deeper and deeper into the woods, until she fell into a hole and sprained her ankle. Ouch! Yelled Teela as she massaged her ankle. Now what? Do I scream for help? She looked around and realized she had fallen into a trap. She was in a dilemma to yell for help, or not, lest she might attract the attention of a nearby enemy. She cursed herself for being careless, and crossed her fingers hoping that help would come sooner than later, before an enemy discovers someone had fallen prey into his trap. Soon, Adam showed Madame Reyes back into the castle for her to take a rest after her journey from Etheria. King Randor and Queen Marlena welcomed the kindly old witch who's a friend of their daughter. Welcome, Madame Raz. Treat this as your home, said King Randor. Good afternoon, Your Majesty. I am just the advance party. Your daughter Adora will be here any minute now. May I just take a little rest as I feel rather dizzy from flying on my silly broom? I'm so glad my daughter and her friends have come to visit us, said Queen Marlena. Adam walked back into the courtyard waiting for Adora's arrival. He hadn't seen her for a year, and he was glad she was home for a visit. He was excited to take her riding in the woods, and to show her the changes that happened around the castle since last she was home, and perhaps she was the person to ask about what girls like, since he seemed to be rubbing Teela the wrong way all the time. Adam looked down as he felt a slight tugging at the helm of his tunic. It was Kranger. Shouldn't you stop pretending to lose all the time? You're starting to get Teela in trouble. I know it's selfish of me, Kranger, but I'm glad Teela is not going to the ball. I don't want her hanging out with other guys. What? Who's my brother getting into trouble? Who's hanging out with other guys? Piped in a sweet, gentle voice. Adam and Kranger looked up and found the svelte blonde girl in red boots and leotards, with a big, warm smile on her face. Adora! Exclaimed Adam. Adam, oh Adam! Cried Adora, as she ran excitedly into her twin brother's arms. Adam twirled his sister around as he locked her in a tight embrace. I'm glad you're home, little sister. I've missed you, dear brother. cried Adora. Adam pat her back as he replied with a big smile. And you. How are you? Asked Adam. Adora blushed. I don't know if I should tell you first, or if I should tell you and Mom and Dad all together. Tell me first, urged Adam. Her blush deepened. I'm getting married. Adam was stunned for a moment before a big smile lit up his face and engulfing his sister in another tight hug. Adora, that's wonderful. Who's the lucky guy? A copper-haired, mustachioed, muscular guy replied good-naturedly, that would be me. Bow, I knew it. There was something in the way you looked at my sister, teased Adam. It was Beau's turn to blush. Was I that transparent? The trio and the rest of Adora and Beau's friends laughed out loud. Your feelings for her were as clear and bright as sunshine, piped in Glimmer. Really? I thought I kept it well hidden, laughed Beau. Well, it doesn't take a genius either to know that Adora had feelings for Beau too, teased Frosta. Stop it, Frosta! I won't invite He-Man to my wedding, she kidded. No, invite him and make me seat next to him on the dinner table, protested Frosta, who had a long-time crush on He-Man. Wow, the whole gang is here. I'm glad. You are all welcome to stay here as long as you like, said Adam. We'll be staying for a while, Adam. Maybe until after the wedding. The preparation for the wedding may take a couple of months. In the meantime, we'll be learning the ropes of Eternia, she said gaily. Are you the maid of honor, Castaspella? Asked Adam. Adora replied in her stead. I was thinking to make Teela my maid of honor. I couldn't decide which among my friends in Etheria, and since Teela has always been like a daughter to mother and father, I'll ask her if she won't mind. I'm sure she won't. Now come on inside the castle. Mother and father are anxious to see you. As the gang walked inside the castle, Cranger shyly approached the white horse grazing in the garden. Hello, Spirit. Glad you could make it. Hello, Cranger. Nice home you have here. Chapter 4. It's getting rather late. Isn't Teela home yet? I'm getting worried, and I'm excited to talk to her about Adora's wedding, asked Queen Marlena. There's plenty of time to talk to her about it, Mother. Adora will be here for 3 months the least. I'll go find Teela, offered Adam. No, you have some visitors. Let me look for Teela, said Man-at-Arms. It was my fault she stormed out angrily this afternoon. Let me find her to make peace with her. Besides, like I said, my sister and I will be bonding for some time, smiled Adam. Why don't I come with you, dear brother? Said Adora. No, you need your rest. You and Teela can talk in the morning. I'll take Cranger with me. Cranger froze in fear. Me? Why me? I'm scared of the forest, especially after sundown. You don't have to be afraid, Cranger. I'm here. We'll look for Teela together. There's nothing to be afraid of. I promise. Okay? But please hold my paw. I'm scared, said Cranger in a trembling voice. It was almost pitch black inside the hole, if not for the moonlight that cast a shadow of the trees around the forest. Teela wasn't scared. She was never one to be afraid of the dark, but it was getting rather chilly, and her swollen ankle made her feel weak. She was in and out of consciousness. She wondered what time it was, and how long she'd been lying down inside the hole. Her throat was dry from thirst, and she swallowed hard to clear her throat. Suddenly, she felt a presence inside the hole with her. Funny that she didn't feel any alarm, despite not knowing if the presence was a friend or a foe. Teela. He spoke her name so gently. Was she dreaming? Was this how one became delirious before dying because she could swear it sounded like Adam? Or was it He-Man? She blinked her eyes several times to make out the outline of his face beneath the moonlight. Funny how she suddenly thought of Adam as synonymous to He-Man. Were they more similar than she ever thought about or believed? Adam removed his pink tunic and draped over Teela's shoulder before holding her closer to his warmth. She was so cold. He examined her closely to see if she had any major injuries. He felt relieved to realize she didn't hurt her head, nor had she sustained any broken bones. She flinched when he touched her sprained ankle. He sighed in relief to know there was nothing serious. Teela. He spoke again, as he gently shook her to wake up. Wake up. Let's go home, he whispered, before brushing his lips on the side of her temple. She uttered a low moan, but Teela didn't want to wake up. If she was having a dream, or a hallucination for that matter, she didn't want it to end. It felt so good to be in Adam's arms, and it was the most wonderful kiss. I wish he would kiss me on the lips too. As though he reading her thoughts, Adam gently brushed his lips on hers for a moment. They would have been longer if not for a shivering, furry tiger that slithered inside the hole with them. "Granger, this hole is too small for the three of us," said Adam. "I want to crawl in here with you. I'm scared to stay up there all alone," protested Granger, shivering with fright. "I couldn't wake Teela, and I can't take her out this hole without her help. Why don't you go back to the castle and get some help? I just need another person to pull her out once I've climbed up this hole," said Adam. "I'm scared. I can't go back to the castle by myself. Let's just all stay here till the morning," said Granger. "But we can't fit in here, Granger," explained Adam. But Granger huddled closer to them in fear. "All right, Granger, you leave me no choice. I didn't want to do this. Not with Teela so close by." He took his sword and yelled, "For the power of Grayskull!" He-Man came into the castle carrying Teela. It was late, and he entered through the side door instead of the main entrance, to alert only Man-at-Arms with his presence. Incidentally, he ran into Adora in the hallway, who was still awake at the time. "Adam, what's happened to Teela?" she exclaimed. "Shh! Someone might hear you. Come help me put Teela to bed. She just hurt her ankle and it needs tendering. Call her father and get me some bandage for her ankle," said He-Man. Teela was only half awake, but slowly became more conscious as she felt the soft warmth of her bed. Was she still dreaming? She felt the covers being drawn over her. She thought she was saved by He-Man, or was it Adam? She wasn't sure anymore, but he felt someone tugging the tunic that draped around her shoulders. She moaned a little and clutched it tighter around her, refusing to let it go. He-Man let it go and faced Man-at-Arms and Adora as they entered the room. "How is she?" asked Man-at-Arms with worry. "She's fine. She just sprained her ankle," explained Adam. She opened her eyes a bit to check what was happening and was astonished to find He-Man talking to her father. Strange. She thought the voice belonged to Adam. Those were her last thoughts before she slipped back into oblivion. The next morning, Teela was awakened by the sunshine entering her window. She smiled lazily and stretched her arms in bed. "Abetta thanked He-Man for saving me." She flinched a little in pain as she tried to move with her sprained ankle. She hopped down the bed and tried to catch her balance in a nearby dresser, when the sight of a familiar pink jacket that fell off her shoulder and onto the floor made her heart skip a beat. She hopped on one leg to reach for the jacket, and unmistakably it was Adam's. Suddenly her head was aching more than her ankle. She vaguely remembered Adam putting it around her and kissing her, but she thought it was only a dream, and yet here was the jacket. She was certain she saw He-Man talking to his father in this very room, but she remembered a woman addressing Adam. "Good morning, Teela. I brought you breakfast." A cheery voice greeted her. "Adora, it's so nice to see you. When did you arrive? Was I asleep that long?" She laughed as she kissed the blonde woman. Adora plopped the small bedroom tray on Teela's bed. "I arrived yesterday, but you were out. Tell me, Adora, who brought me in my room?" she asked eagerly. "Why, it was your father. And me," smiled Adora. "Was there anyone else?" she asked. "No, it was just me and your father." Teela clutched the pink tunic in her hand, hidden from Adora's view. She couldn't have been mistaken, could she? "Adam! Adam!" called out Adora as she helped herself inside his room. There was no answer, but before she could turn back and leave, she noticed a glistening female headdress on his bed. She examined it closely and realized she had seen it before. On Teela. "What you doing, Adora?" she gasped. Adam came out of the bathroom drying his hair. "You startled me, Adam. Why is Teela's headdress with you? Don't you think you're a bit too old to be playing tricks on girls?" teased Adora. Adam smiled sheepishly before seating on the bed. Well?" probed Adora. Adam sighed before meeting his sister's stare solemnly. "I took it because I like the way she looks with her hair down, but I couldn't tell her, "Hey Teela, could you just take off that headdress because I love the way you look with your hair down. The way your red hair glistens beneath the sun like dancing fire. The feel of your long hair when it brushes against me when we duel." "I can't say that." Adora crossed her arms and smiled at her brother. "Have you told her you like her?" "No, I wanted to, but I'm not sure how she would take it," he told his sister defeatedly. "We wouldn't know until you do. For all we know, she's in love with you too." "Oops, I didn't say anything about love, Adora," protested Adam. "You don't have to, dear brother. It's written all over your face." Adam smiled. "Oh yeah? Well, have you told your husband to be that you possess a secret?" Adora's smile faded. "No. In fact, I don't know how to tell him. I wanted to, but I don't know how." "Well, sis, welcome to the club. That's exactly how I feel about Teela. I wanted to tell her, but I don't know how." Chapter 5. Amidst the flamboyant and festive preparations for the coming wedding of Princess Adora to the kindly warrior Beau, there hovered a silent but vigilant enemy at a distance, circling the castle grounds and the deep recesses of the woods of Eternia, taking every detail of the merry atmosphere of the occasion to report back to his master Skeletor. Meanwhile, in his dark, gloomy fortress that seemed to shake at every bitter word that he hailed to his subjects, stood the merciless but oftentimes outwitted Skeletor, venting out his frustration of being unable to capture his sworn nemesis He-Man. "You incompetent fools! We are still unable to catch He-Man. We must catch the protector of Eternia. Then we shall have King Randor and the whole Eternia surrender to my power. But we tried to catch him, but he is too strong for us," reasoned out Beast Man. "You hairy old fool, you are almost as big as he is, and you are afraid of him," yelled Skeletor. "We are not afraid. It's just we can't find him," reasoned Triclops. "You have thrice the number of eyes, and you still can't find him. Just my luck to have idiots for minions," growled Skeletor as he slammed his fist on his throne. Screech! His barbaric bird flew in like thunder, which almost caused him to collide on the throne, totally excited about his interesting news. "Sir, Princess Adora is back and she is getting married in midsummer. The palace is busy in the celebration. She has all her friends with her staying at the palace." An evil smirk formed in Skeletor's face. "What great news, my pet. Now we know why there's no He-Man in sight. Not enough chaos and too much merriment. We must do something about that." Screech continued. "That's not the only news, sir. A princess from a nearby kingdom is due to arrive any time soon for a courtesy visit, and I heard the people are hoping for a double wedding." Skeletor burst into a malevolent laughter. He stood from his throne and demanded, "Evelyn, you must cook up what chaos we can throw to the kingdom. With their guard down, they shall certainly fall into our hands. Don't fail me, Evelyn, or I shall throw you into a cauldron of burning oil." Her bent head looked up, and a glint of evil stared back into the hollow sockets of Skeletor's eyes. "I will not fail you, Skeletor. Before midsummer, Eternia shall be yours." "Hey, Teela, wait up!" cried a deep, masculine voice in urgency. Teela was almost past the castle grounds when she heard the all-too-familiar voice that disconcertingly too often made her heart stir. She was hoping to avoid him again. Having him close had made her feel like a fish out of water, and she totally disliked these mixed emotions that are getting stronger and inevitable by the day. Her heart would do jumping jacks and her stomach somersaults. She was afraid he could feel the turmoil inside her. She slumped her hand beside her in despair and sighed. His voice was too close to pretend she didn't hear him. She stopped in her tracks and turned around. She didn't notice him close in on their distance before she turned and found herself staring into the pool of his light blue eyes. "I'm sorry. Did I startle you?" said Adam, as he gently steadied her by the shoulder, putting a little space between them. When Teela didn't reply, he continued with a wry smile. "You're still not mad at me for hiding your headdress, are you?" "No, of course not," replied Teela, trying to return his smile. "Have you been avoiding me? I hardly see you nowadays," he asked with a note of worry. When Teela regained her balance and wits, she continued to walk away from the castle grounds and into the woods, hoping that Adam would somehow give up talking to her. "Don't be silly. I've been busy with work and training. You have been busy yourself, with the wedding and all, plus the princess who's coming over for a visit. You mustn't forget about her, lest she comes home and tells her folks the prince." A piercing scream filled the air. "Ah! Help me, please! Someone help me!" came a desperate, helpless voice. Before Adam or Teela could react, a bunch of Skeletor's men came out of nowhere and attacked them. It was so sudden that had Adam's reflexes had not been sharp to blow off Beastman's attack, Teela would have suffered a blow, but she got away with only a yelp of surprise. For a moment she was stunned, as it dawned to her that she and Adam were fighting hand in hand against Skeletor's men. Since when had he had some interest in fighting, much alone a very skillful defense? "Hey, when did you learn to do that?" asked Teela in perplexity, as she continued giving a hand in the fight against Skeletor's men. "I have a good teacher," smiled Adam. Teela felt a blush creeping on her face. Whether it was the compliment or his charming smile directed at her, she wasn't sure. To add to her awe, Adam managed to defeat Triclops and Beastman, leaving Clawful alone as the sole enemy for Teela. But before he could get his hands on Clawful, another scream pierced the air. "Go help her, Adam. I can take care of this," said Teela. "Of course you can," smiled Adam, before proceeding to the area where the voice was coming from. In no time, Teela took out Clawful with her bare hands without a sweat, but her smug smile was cut short as she saw Adam came back with his rescue. An unconscious woman in a flowing peach dress and a bejeweled tiara on top of her waist-length straight blonde hair was in the arms of Prince Adam. Teela couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. We better get her back to the castle. I sure hope she is all right. I wonder what Skeletor may want with her. She was being abducted by his minions," said Adam as he stared at the girl with concern. "Sometimes I wish I were a damsel in distress," muttered Teela under her breath, as she followed Adam back to the castle. Chapter 6. "Hehe. Very good Evelyn. I was counting on He-Man rescuing her, but getting rescued by the prince and getting inside the palace of King Randor was not bad at all," laughed Skeletor as Screech updated him on that morning's events. The repulsive skeleton stood up from his throne and walked down the aisle to face his minions in apparent triumph, blazing in his eyes. "Soon the whole of Eternia will be at my mercy, and I shall be hailed King of Eternia. Ha 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 ha. Duh-uh. What if Evelyn fails? What if He-Man doesn't show up, and she couldn't put the magic collar that will drain all his strength?" asked Beastman. "Evelyn should draw him out, because if she fails to deliver He-Man to me, I will wipe her out," screamed Skeletor in anger. "Well, she should just very well remember she cannot get wet, or her disguise will vanish in smoke," pointed out Triclops. "She is not as stupid as some of us are," pointed out Trapjaw, looking at Beastman. "Grr, who is stupid? You want me to break you into pieces?" threatened Beastman. Whiplash, Clawful, and Toobad burst out laughing at the exchange. Beastman threw the nearest item he could get hold of into the direction of Trapjaw, but he missed and hit Clawful. In retaliation, Clawful threw a rock at Beastman, but missed and hit Trapjaw. The three ended up in a ramble, as each rolled around the floor of Snake Mountain, trying to hit one another. The others broke in raucous laughter as they watched the three. "Silence! You're making my head ache with all these nonsense, you idiots!" reprimanded Skeletor. "But what are we going to do with her?" asked Jitsu, as he held the struggling Avalon princess by the arm. Skeletor approached them and sneered. "Throw her to the dungeon. The real princess of Avalon may come in handy if Evelyn fails. Now take her away and away, you fools. I don't want to see your ugly faces in here. I didn't know the prince would be so charming. I believe I would enjoy my stay in Eternia," said the princess demurely, as she gave Prince Adam a flash of her inviting smile. You can't miss the sparkle of her royal blue eyes. "We're glad you are safe, Princess. We're sorry you were ambushed on your way, and all of your men died in the incident. We'll send word to Avalon that you have arrived safe and sound, despite of the unfortunate incident, to allay your parents' fear," said King Randor. Teela caught the subtle flirtation of the princess, which made her roll her eyes. She was quite a distance from them, being seated between Glimmer and Adora on the other end of the long table near Queen Marlena, while Prince Adam and the princess were seated across from each other at either side of King Randor at the other end. It's a good thing her father was so engrossed with his conversation with Bo that he didn't notice her make a face. Otherwise, he would scold her later in the evening about being too old to be making faces like a child. "What's the matter, Teela? Doesn't your supper agree with you, my dear?" asked Queen Marlena in concern. No, Your Majesty. I'm just, not feeling quite well. May I be excused for the rest of the evening?" replied Teela in a low voice. "Very well, my child. You may be excused. I will send for the doctor to look in on you," replied the Queen. Man-at-Arms asked in concern, "Does something ail you, daughter?" Teela stood up and excused herself. "I'll be fine, father." "Thank you, Your Majesty, but all I need is a little aspirin that I can find in the medicine cabinet. Please don't worry about me. Supper is superb, Your Majesty. I'll tell my mother how excellent your dishes are," piped in the princess, addressing the Queen to take her mind off Teela. "Why, thank you. I do hope you will also find your chambers most comfortable," replied the Queen graciously. Someone couldn't suppress a knowing smile as she watched Teela leave the dining hall in a sour mood. "Why haven't you taken a sip of your wine? Is it not to your taste?" asked Adora. "We can ask for another one that's more suitable to your taste," suggested Man-at-Arms. The princess looked suddenly uncomfortable, but managed to hide her uneasiness with a gracious smile. "Don't go to all the trouble. I'm just not much of a wine drinker, I'm afraid." "What about a glass of fruit punch?" suggested the Queen. Despite that the princess politely declined for a fruit punch, the Queen anyhow ordered a glass of water be brought to her. In the course of conversation, Madame Raz suddenly found herself stopping in the middle of her delectable dinner from the other table. She put down the leg of chicken and eyed the princess suspiciously. Cowell caught Madame Raz's eye and knew something was up. He too decided to be alert as he watched both Madame Raz and the princess. He noticed that throughout dinner, Madame Raz never took her eyes off the princess, and not once did the princess ever take a sip of water. Later after dessert, Bo and Adam were at the receiving hall for an after-dinner coffee amidst a tete-a-tete. Teela was observing the people from the window of the patio. Being dark outside, she can see them without being seen. Yet, she didn't know exactly what possessed her to go out into the garden with nothing but her nightgown and wrap. She tried to retire early, but she wanted to see Adam, see how he was with her when he thought she wasn't around. Teela was careful not to bump the set in the patio as she came closer to the enormous floor-to-ceiling French window for a better view. She was just in time to hear Bo and Adam conversing a few meters from where she was. "Fool, she sure looks so smitten with you, Adam. I'm almost kind of certain that there will be a double wedding come midsummer," jested Bo. Adora overheard her fiancé and decided to join the conversation. "What are you talking about, Bo? My brother is not marrying anyone unless he wants to. It's not fair that he is forced to marry someone for the sake of the kingdom while I get to choose who I want," said Adora. "He is the future king, after all. Adora, and a king must make sacrifices for the sake of his subjects, his kingdom, and his people," put in King Randor. Adora wasn't in total agreement with her father. Indeed, a king must put his kingdom first before himself, but not when it comes to the matters of the heart. She was about to protest when Bo interrupted. He knew Adora. She would argue her point, and he didn't want her to get into an argument with her father in front of him in a room full of people. "Of course not, Adora. No one's forcing Adam. I was just thinking they would make a lovely couple to rule Eternia someday, and the princess is not at all bad-looking. I'm sure Adam is fond of her," teased Bo. "They certainly are," agreed King Randor. Teela was suddenly aware of a tear sliding down her cheek. "No, please, don't make Adam marry her." "Well, it's about time I do get married," Adam said wistfully. Teela burst into tears and ran back into her room without hearing the rest of the conversation. "But only if I manage to propose. You know how unprepared I am just yet." "What if she says no? I have to find a way to convince her," said Adam. "I take it you are not referring to the princess," stated his father. Adam refused to comment further, and his father and Adora left him alone with Bo. Adam smiled at Bo. Well, you're right about one thing, Bo. The princess is indeed beautiful. But I can't explain. There's something ethereal about her, as if she isn't real. Chapter 7. I don't know, Cowl. There is something fishy about that princess. I just know it, said Madame Raz, her hand poised on her cheeks in deep thought as she floats about on her broom. So she doesn't like to drink water during dinner. Doesn't mean she's a witch or a sorceress, explained Cowl, flapping his long ears to stay afloat beside the eccentric witch. Don't you know that a witch's disguise will disappear with a drop of water? I just don't believe someone can eat a whole dinner without as much as a sip of wine or coffee or anything for that matter. Why, you could easily choke on your meal. Perhaps she slices them into little tiny pieces so she wouldn't choke. Now come, on Madame Raz. It's very late and the evening is so chilly. We need to get up early tomorrow, pointed Cowl as he went ahead inside the castle. Madame Raz, shaking her head, followed. So, unknown to them, Evelyn disguised as the princess was lurking in the shadows, listening to their every word. Ooh, I hate that silly old witch. If only I could get my hands on her. I must make my move before they expose my deception. Teela woke up the next day with the feeling of armed men pounding her head. Is this what they call a hangover? I don't remember drinking more than 2 glasses of vodka. Or was this the cause of the extra tablet of aspirin for my especially strong headache? Heartache is more like it. Or could it be the dose of the sleeping tablet? She had never taken a sleeping pill. She felt she needed the vodka, the aspirin, and the sleeping pill, just to alleviate the shock and sorrow with what she overheard last night. She glanced at her bedside clock, which read 9 a.m. Her eyes went wide as she sprung up in bed, only to feel the blood rush to her head, making her dizzy. She held the bedpost for support as she slowly sat back on the bed. Her father was going to be furious if he found out she wasn't up in time to escort the princess in her tour of Eternia. What the heck? They may have left without me. No use rushing. If they needed me, they would have woken me up. She groped her way to the bathroom for a shower, trying her best to fight the slight feeling of faint. Wrapped in her bathrobe after the warm shower, she sat on the bed, sipping a cup of Darjeeling tea from her dinette. Her mind gradually clearing up, she tried to recall the events of the previous evening. She was feeling very drowsy after drinking the sleeping pill with her second glass of vodka, that she lay her head on the pillow, hoping to just rest her aching head. She didn't want to sleep yet, not without taking off her robe nor taking off her slippers, when suddenly, just when she was about to give into oblivion, in her very awkward sleeping position, she heard him call her name. First there was a knock, a soft but insistent one. She wanted to get up and open the door and tell him to leave her alone in her misery, but her limbs felt heavy. Then she heard him whisper her name, and felt him approach the bed. He must have entered since she left the door unlocked. Teela, are you all right? I know it's improper to visit you in your chambers at night, but you had me worried. Teela? Adam picked up the bottle of aspirin on the bedside table and examined it. Surely it was only natural to feel sleepy after medication, or should he panic? He noticed the gentle rise and fall of her chest in a peaceful slumber. Oh, my dear princess, I guess you're too deep in your sleep to listen to what I have to say, he uttered with a little laugh and a note of disappointment. I love you, Teela. I wish you could hear me, he said, before lifting her a little for a more comfortable position in bed. Suddenly she was more awake than asleep, but she still couldn't move her hands to touch his face. She could feel his breath on her cheek, albeit her eyes remained close. She knew he was so close. Nos. Teela felt Adam slip her robe off her shoulders before gently laying her comfortably on her bed. He brushed his fingers on a strand of red hair that fell across her face. Though her hair was already away from her face, spread on the pillow, she could still feel his fingers running through a couple of strands in a rhythmic, soothing manner that was slowly helping her back to oblivion when she felt the gentle brush of his lips against hers. Her heart was singing, longing to shout out that she loved him too, but the aspirin and the sleeping pill were against her. Her limbs still felt too heavy to move, and just when she was enjoying the deliciously gentle kiss, it was gone for a second, only to have it glide down just as gently down her throat, until it was at the base where her pulse was surely pumping hard in anticipation. She was afraid he could feel it. Nah, and perhaps he did feel her pulse beat a bit faster at his touch, for he gathered all his strength to stop and pull up the covers to tuck her in bed. Forgive me, Teela. Your beauty made me forget myself for a moment, but I shall wait till we are wed this midsummer. Then, when you truly are my princess, I shall love you every moment of our life together. With his promise, he kissed her one last time on her brow before leaving the room. With a cup of tea still in hand, Teela was pondering hard whether she dreamt the whole thing or not, when Orko suddenly appeared beside her. "Orko, what are you doing here?" she asked. "Me? What are you still doing in bed? It's past 10 in the morning. Your father has been wondering where you went since the princess and Prince Adam decided to go without you and the rest of the entourage," explained Orko. Teela felt a pang of jealousy. "You mean Adam is alone with the princess?" she shrieked. "Well, Prince Adam didn't want to wake you up. He visited your room this morning and found you still sleeping. He plucked a red rose from the garden and said he was giving it to you." Teela wondered where the rose could have gone, and as if reading her mind, Orko pointed underneath the dinette table. "Look, there it is." Teela grabbed the red rose from under the table in excitement and noticed a missive tied to the rose with a red lace. She was about to read it to when she noticed Orko was eagerly watching her. She decided to postpone reading it. "And oh, as I was saying, Adam didn't want your father to know you forgot about escorting the princess around, so he dismissed everyone in the entourage and told them that they are free to resume their other duties while he takes the princess around. He figured with everyone scattered about." Orko noticed Teela fumbling the note while talking to him as though she couldn't wait to read it. "Well, I better go now and leave you to your letter. I mean to your duties. Bye." In a puff, Orko was gone, and Teela eagerly unfolded the letter. "My dear Teela, forgive me for visiting your chamber last night, as I had something important I wished to discuss with you. Unfortunately, you were out like a log and left me no other choice but to write you instead. I did not wish to rush you into things, and that's why I have not openly discussed what I believe is a mutual affection between us until the need arose last night. With the arrival of the Princess of Avalon, my father implied that I must marry the princess to seal our alliance with their kingdom. I do not wish to disobey my father the king without good reason, and the only good reason I have to defy his wishes is you. And there is no other woman I would like to take as my future queen to rule Eternia but you. I need to talk to my father about this soon. And so before I ask your father for your hand in marriage, I ask you, would you do me the honor of being my queen? If I had been sadly mistaken about your affection for me, and do not wish to marry me, then despite my heart belonging to you, I shall do as my father bid and marry the Princess of Avalon. Always, Prince Adam." Chapter 8. Teela's pulse raced, doubling its speed with every loving line she read in the missive, until she felt breathless by the time she read his name. It was so astonishing that in a matter of minutes, she managed to eradicate even the slightest tinge of her hangover. Her senses were all alive. She could even hear the chirping of the birds in the courtyard and the murmur of voices just outside the hallway. She was stunned by the turn of events, unable to think clearly, unable to decide what to do at the moment that she stared at Adam's letter for a few more minutes after she had read it. Yet she felt alive and indestructible, and not even the end of the world can banish the inexplicable joy she felt. Regaining her full capacity, she dashed out of her room in search of Adam, all the time her head swimming with questions she kept throwing to herself, in which she didn't know the answers as of yet. What's going to happen if my father finds out? Will King Randor and Queen Marlena accept me as Adam's queen? Suppose Adam will be dethroned? What then? Will Adam someday regret marrying me? Suppose the King of Avalon insists that Eternia should honor the engagement between Adam and the Princess of Avalon? She found Adora alone by the enormous apple tree adjacent to the patio. She was busily brushing the ivory mane of her horse spirit as she whistled a happy tune. Teela approached her delightedly. Adora, have you seen Adam? The excitement and gaiety in Teela's voice was unmistakable, and although she caught Adora by surprise, the Princess of Eternia could sense the overwhelming joy and see the sparkle of merriment in Teela's eyes. I think he went to show the waterfalls to the princess. It was You're awfully in a good mood, smiled Adora. Teela beamed at her. I most certainly am. Thanks. Wait, Adora was unable to utter another word as Teela rushed out to the direction of the falls. Adora welcomed the sight of Teela in a good mood, for she had noticed her constant forlorn expression and sour mood ever since the Princess of Avalon came to visit. Be careful, there's a storm coming, yelled Adora. I hope she heard me. Oh well, she could take care of herself. Already? Whatever unnerving feelings and malevolent suspicions that were persistently gnawing at the back of his mind about the Princess of Avalon were, in fact, heightened instead of abated the more he spent time with her. Adam eyed her curiously as she continued to protest about continuing on to the falls. She insisted she wasn't fond of waterfalls. You've seen one. You've seen them all, she pointed out. He couldn't understand such adamant protest about seeing the majestic waterfalls. Adam sighed and rested beneath an orange tree. She was getting somewhat tired of his obligation to the princess. It was quite a walk from the castle to the woods, and here she was, looking ungrateful and disinterested. For a few minutes they sat without talking. The sound of a nearby brook rustling mildly against the rocks penetrated the silent atmosphere. Adam rose to help himself with a little sip of water from the brook. He remembered his manners and asked, Would you like a drink of water, dear princess? Adam's brows furrowed with suspicion as the princess replied, No, thank you. I told you I'm not fond of water. But we walked quite a distance, said Adam. I can't believe she doesn't need a drink. Really, I'm fine, insisted the princess. Suddenly, without warning, the angry thunder roared with intense ferocity, and within a minute the heavy downpour from the sky followed it with uncontrollable vivacity. Evelyn's disguise lost its enchantment as the thick, heavy rain washed away the spell. Evelyn gasped in horror. However, her sudden change of appearance was yet unnoticed by Adam, who was a couple of yards away. I must do something before he sees me. From a couple of feet where Teela trekked from the castle, she could clearly see, however appearing smaller due to the distance, Adam's broad back seated by the brook, his sunshine blonde hair turning into a mop of dark straws as the ferocious rain drenched him with antagonism. Teela's breath stopped in fear as she saw the menacing evil figure of Evil Lynn slowly advancing in threatening steps towards the unsuspecting Adam. Teela anxiously yelled Adam's name to get his attention. She yelled harder to compete against the thundering droplets of rain, till finally, as though the wind carried her cry to her prince, Adam stood up and glanced around calling out Teela's name. He wondered if he only imagined her, or did she call him out in anguish. Teela, where are you? He called out as he drew his sword. In his sudden alertness, Evelyn made herself invisible before Adam could see her. He steadily walked back to the orange tree, where he left the princess, and to his astonishment, she was nowhere in sight. He called out her name, but there was no response. Sound. In her haste to reach Adam before Evelyn could hurt him, Teela lost her footing and started slipping down the deep ravine. She let out a piercing scream of surprise rather than fear. Her competent warrior skills enabled her to hold on to an edge of a protruding rock before she could plummet to her death. But her screams were enough to rouse Adam's protective instincts, and in a flash, though he couldn't see Teela, he raised his sword to change into the mighty warrior He-Man. Just as rapidly as his transformation, he found Teela precariously hanging on the rock, and before she could lose her hold, He-Man was there to the rescue. As he pulled her up, he was about to hug her in his relief of her safety when she pulled away and began dashing toward the brook where Adam was last seated. It's Adam! We've got to help him! Evelyn is here! She's gonna hurt him! Cried Teela. But as she earnestly reached the brook, there was no sign of either Adam or Evelyn. She panicked. Where is Adam? She's got him! He-Man was soon beside her. Don't worry about Adam. He's safe. Teela was adamant. You don't understand. I saw Evil Lynn. She was after him. He-Man insisted. Let me take you back to the castle. I don't think the weather would be considerate any time soon. I'll look for the princess. I'll get her and Adam back to the castle safely. Adam, you must find Adam first, cried Teela. Adam can take care of himself. The princess we must worry about. The king and queen of Avalon will be furious if something happens to her during her visit, said He-Man. He and Teela had been arguing all the way back to the castle. Adam can't take care of himself. He has a lot more to learn in defending himself. He is the crowned prince of our kingdom and must be saved, insisted Teela. I told you not to worry, said Adam, trying to dissipate Teela's anxiety and irritation. Teela insisted she would help He-Man look for Adam and the princess, but He-Man wouldn't hear of it. He didn't want to be torn between his duty to save the princess and the safety of the woman he loves. He would feel safer and more confident if he knew Teela was safe in the castle. You're so stubborn. I don't know how I can fall. He stopped himself before he could say fall in love with such a hard-headed girl. Teela gave him an angry look. I don't care what you call me, but I'm going after Adam. Though not in his nature to be stern, He-Man suddenly spoke in an authoritative manner to stand his ground. Let's not argue, Teela. The more time we spend squabbling, the longer Adam and the princess are out there. I told you he will be fine. Stay here, declared He-Man in austerity. Chapter 9. A glint of evil menace sparkled in the ebony black eyes of the wicked witch Evil Lynn as she witnessed Prince Adam's transformation to He-Man. She watched undetected, unseen by Teela and He-Man, as Teela searched frantically for Adam back at the orange tree after her rescue. She saw the tumultuous current of ardent emotion she expressed for Adam. She was hell-bent in going to his rescue. She had a mind of her own that not even the mighty He-Man can dissuade her. No one can dictate to her, and a woman as Evil Lynn knew as she was one, often acted in the dictates of her heart, and no one can stop her, and especially no man has the power to stop the brave and strong lady warrior Teela from doing what she wants. So that is where you were hiding, Great Master He-Man, in the personage of the prince. No one would have suspected that the protected prince was indeed the mighty protector of Eternia. I shall have you. You shall be in our power. The mighty Skeletor will be pleased, and the only way to get you is through the lady warrior who has so much affection for the crowned prince. Like all mighty warriors, your downfall will be a woman, the woman deeply infatuated with you, or shall I say with the crowned prince of Eternia. Back at Castle Grayskull, Skeletor was furious that Evil Lynn was back in her natural form. He had his hopes up that Evil Lynn's scheme would have King Randor and He-Man at his mercy. He could smell the sweet scent of triumph and revenge, and now the sight of Evil Lynn back without the prince sent his blood boiling and his eyes emanating laser beams to everyone inside the castle. You miserable woman! Have you been found out? I can see I cannot count on any of you miserable fools, yelled Skeletor, as another round of laser beams shot out of eyeless holes in his skeleton face. Evil Lynn was undaunted. The evil gleam in her dark eyes intensified as she told Skeletor she had change of plans that would ensure their victory and conquest over Eternia. From all the minions standing around Skeletor's throne, she grabbed the nearest one within reach, Webstor. But the poor minion was frightened to death as he saw the wicked gleam in Evil Lynn's eyes. Why me? He freaked out as Evil Lynn grabbed him by the shoulder. He immediately pulled Beastman, the closest one to him, and shoved him in the direction of Evil Lynn. Take him? He's ugly and he's useless, he said with a quiver. Beastman growled and hit Webster at the back of the head, and the two started to fight. Silence, yelled Skeletor. Evil Lynn smirked. Any volunteer? She asked. All of Skeletor's men swallowed hard and crossed their fingers Evil Lynn would pick anyone but him. Two Bad's heads started arguing with each other. Each had wanted the other to volunteer, and with a sigh of irritation, Evil Lynn grabbed Two Bad harshly and kept him immobile till the spell was finished. Skeletor's reverberating, diabolical laughter showed his pleasure at Evelyn's new evil scheme, while his minions were stunned and speechless. In her hands now stand the exact image of Prince Adam. Despite the nasty weather that kept the household of King Randor inside the castle indoors, a messenger from another kingdom, soaked to his bones, came knocking at the castle doors, bearing a letter for King Randor. Duncan let him in and led him to the throne room where the king sat with his queen to receive visitors. "Nanti, I bear an important message for the king," declared the messenger. King Randor ordered Duncanto read the letter, and as Duncan finished reading the missive, he looked at King Randor with alarm. "This letter is from Avalon. The king and queen apologizes that they cannot come to Eternia as planned. However, they will be arriving next spring," said Duncan. Duncan turned to the messenger. "Are you a messenger from the king himself? Have you any proof of your identity? When was this message penned?" The servants handed the poor messenger a towel to dry himself before addressing the king. He bowed before Duncan and handed him his kerchief with the emblem of Avalon. "I am from the king of Avalon. I set out to bring you his message 2 weeks ago, but me and my 2 companions ran into a couple of mishaps, which I'm sure his majesty would not care to hear about, that delayed this message for a few days. Pardon me, my lord. I hope you would not punish me for those unfortunate circumstances." Duncan raised the kerchief for King Randor to see the emblem before handing it to him for closer inspection. It was genuine. "Stani, give this man some dry clothes and give him shelter until the bad weather abates," said the king, and the soldiers led him away from the throne. King Randor addresses Duncan. "Then we have an impostor in our midst. Let me and my men search for Prince Adam and the impostor. We'll set out at once," said Duncan before fleeing the throne in earnest. Man-at-Arms's anxiety increased as he found no traces of his daughter in the castle grounds. He informed Adora and her friends about the turn of events. Bo and the other warriors insisted they help look for Adam and Teela. "You must stay here, Bo. We cannot leave the castle unguarded. They need you here. I'll bring a couple of men with me," said Duncan. "Teela went after Adam and the princess this morning. I hope they are all right. My brother will take care of them, I'm sure," said Adora. "I'm worried about Teela. Her audacity would get her in trouble someday. I certainly hope I'm wrong. I don't think I can forgive myself if something happens to her. I may have been too strict that made her innately bold and fearless," said Man-at-Arms sadly. Chapter 10. She was mad. Raving mad. She was so mad her face might have a tinge of red similar to her long, wavy locks as she watched He-Man leave the castle without her. Who does he think he is? Just because he was the protector of Eternia doesn't mean he could tell me what to do. My father and I were doing just fine protecting the king and his subjects, even before he came along. Teela was restless, no matter what. She still couldn't allay her worries. She wasn't one to take things easily. She must act. Thoughts of Adam being tortured and imprisoned by Skeletor were grazing her thoughts. Impulsively, despite the heavy rain, before her father or anyone could see her and stop her from looking for Adam, she purposefully fled the castle, her dagger in tow, with a clear intent in mind, to find Adam and keep him safe. Beyond the castle grounds was pitch black, except for the occasional strikes of lightning that illuminated the forest grounds, the silhouette of trees and rocks displaying the monster-like effigies that would make one's spine crawl. But the brave warrior Teela walked past slopes, groping her way among bushes and swamps, welcoming each stroke of lightning that guided her, till she reached the higher ground where the spooky Snake Mountain rested in its evil domain. She did not need to walk any further in Skeletor's castle, for the minute she set foot in it, Skeletor's minions were waiting to attack, but their strategy was no match for the skilled Teela. But her victory was short-lived, for in a blink of an eye appeared the frightfully wicked evil Lyn that immobilized Teela with a wave of her right hand. A blare of white light emanated from her magical hand as she choked Teela to death. Despite Teela's struggle for breath, her fighting spirit remained intact. "I am not afraid of you, evil Lyn. You can kill me, but I shall not shudder," stated Teela. As sudden as her appearance, evil Lyn dropped Teela with another wave of her hand, and Teela fell on the floor, struggling to regain her breath. Evelyn's raging anger turned to a piercing diabolical laughter. "I am not after you, Teela. Who wants the daughter of the captain of the guards if I have this?" With an evil glint in her eyes and a mocking smile, she opened her right arm wide to reveal her surprise for Teela. Beneath her long velvet black cape lay a lifeless Adam. "Adam!" cried Teela. She tried to run to him, but Evelyn immobilized her once again with her magical hand. Evelyn gave out another diabolical laugh. She knew she could get to Teela. "Let him go. I can fight you for his life," cried Teela in anger. She tried not to show too much emotion, for she knew that if she did, Adam will be done for. "Take it easy now. You can have him back, in one condition," said Evelyn. Teela waited with anger burning in her eyes. Had she any power, her eyes would have killed Evelyn with the livid look she gave her. "She'll do anything for Adam. You get the prince back if you give He-Man," demanded Evelyn. Teela gasped. "Don't be a fool. I cannot defeat He-Man," she barked. "I didn't tell you to kill him. Just bring him to me." Teela was livid. "There's no way I can drag him here kicking and screaming. I don't have his strength." Evelyn smirked. "Then you would just have to say goodbye to your prince, Teela." Teela was in tears as she paved her way back to lower ground from Snake Mountain. She felt weak, unsettled, and completely lost, walking and slipping from one muddy bank to the next without any direction. Her hair was drenched by the rain, trickles of its cold wetness mixing with her tears as they smudged the specks of dirt on her face. She was confused. She didn't know what to do. All she wanted was to get Adam back home safely, but she didn't know how. She was so lost in thought. So overwrought she lost her footing and stumbled into the river. She did not get up, but let her hot, angry tears blend in with the water. Suddenly, strong hands touched her shoulders and held her up to her feet. He-Man spotted her from a distance and was initially angry about her obstinacy. He made his way toward her purposefully, ready to give her a piece of his mind. When he noticed she was not herself, she was overwrought and walking with a blank stare that she fell into the river. His heart got the better of him, and he held her close to him as soon as he reached her in the river. He wanted to comfort her and ask her what was wrong. What was it that hurt or upset her? And he would do everything to make it right. But to his astonishment, Teela launched at his chest with her angry fists. "I hate you. You lied. You said Adam was all right. You said you'll take care of him. You're a liar," cried Teela as she repeatedly hit his chest. Though she was strong, his blows didn't flinch He-Man. He tried to embrace her, to fight her off with his loving embrace and tell her he didn't understand what she was talking about. But before anything further was said, Teela grabbed his sword from his back and pushed him away. His stand didn't falter a bit, but Teela's actions stunned him for a moment. "Stay away," cried Teela. "Teela, what are you doing? You're not yourself." "Give me back the sword," said He-Man kindly but firmly. Teela started taking persistent steps backwards, but her eyes remained on He-Man. "I'm sorry. I have to do this. Please don't follow me. I just want to save Prince Adam," explained Teela, before turning back toward Snake Mountain and running as fast as she could. Back at Skeletor's throne room. "What is this? I don't want this miserable glowing necklace," glared Skeletor angrily as Evelyn handed him a thick metal neck ring. "If we put it around He-Man's neck or anyone's, it will weaken him and prevent him to use his powers or his physical strength," explained Evelyn. "What useless thing! I want to have his superhuman strength." "Give me He-Man's power," demanded Skeletor. "I would have to research how." Evelyn was cut short when she noticed Teela's presence back at Snake Mountain. She gave Teela a condescending smile. "Back so soon?" commented Evelyn. "Where is He-Man?" demanded Evelyn. Teela met her gaze with unwavering force and confidence. "He's not here," she replied. Evelyn was furious. A ball of fire appeared in the middle of her right palm, and she toyed with it with the fingers of her left hand, spinning it around to make the fire darker and fiercer. "Then I shall kill Prince Adam," she said, gesturing to throw the bell to the slumped figure of Adam at her feet. "Wait! If you kill him, it will be for naught. But if you spare him and give him to me—" She paused for a moment. Teela slowly raised He-Man's sword for Evelyn and Skeletor to see it in its full glory and magnificence. "I shall give you He-Man's sword. With it, you may have the chance to defeat him. Give me Prince Adam," she demanded. Skeletor, mesmerized by the magnificent sword, slowly walked toward Teela to touch the sword, but Teela took a few steps back, but continued to taunt Skeletor with the sword. "You want this, you piece of brainless skeleton? Come and get it, but not without giving me Prince Adam," she commanded. "What are you doing, Teela?" said He-Man as he suddenly appeared inside Skeletor's throne room. "I told you to stay out of this. I need to save Prince Adam," yelled Teela, feeling agitated at the presence of He-Man, which might ruin her plans. "What are you talking about? Prince Adam doesn't need to be saved," said He-Man. "What a reunion," said Skeletor. "You can talk about your issues, but I'll take this," continued Skeletor, as he grabbed the sword from the hand of the distracted Teela. "Nita." "Get him!" cried Skeletor to his minions. He-Man and Skeletor's men fought in a wild frenzy, and Teela saw this as an opportunity to take the lifeless Adam from Evelyn's claws. She rushed to Evelyn and pushed her with all her might, and tried to half carry, half drag Adam for the center of chaos. But as soon as her wet hands touched Adam, and her wet hair dripped all over his body, the disguise melted away into her horror and astonishment. In her hands lay the horrible-looking Too Bad. Evelyn let out a long, mocking laughter before holding out the palm of her hand to strike a laser beam at the distracted, dumbfounded, and horrified Teela. Instinctively, He-Man rushed in front of Teela to protect her with his body. "No, Teela!" he yelled in horror. Since his sword was not in his possession to be their shield or to thwart any coming beams that could kill them, he had no choice but to use himself to shield Teela from the burning laser beams hurled by Evelyn. He dashed in front of her just in time to take the beam that came lashing at her. Teela watched in horrified stance as He-Man faced an arduous duel with Evelyn, as he protected her from inevitable death. She couldn't believe she fell for Evelyn's trap. If Adam was not in Snake Mountain, then where is he? She was confused. She remained immobile behind He-Man, thinking hard about what to do. Evelyn continued to heave her beams towards He-Man's body, wanting to defeat and kill him, but because of He-Man's strength, her magic powers couldn't do so, and slowly as she continuously hailed the beams, she started turning old and gray until she was as dry as a driftwood. And to keep herself from getting killed in their duel, she staggered back as she conceded. But He-Man was not left unscathed. Without his sword, his powers were lessened. And during his long battle of power with Evelyn, albeit he won in the end, to everyone's astonishment and to the stupefied Teela's intensified horror, during the duel, his body took a toll in warding off the evil, powerful beams. He-Man was gradually turning into Adam. His tunic became his white and pink clothing, and his dark blonde hair gradually turned back into its sunshine blonde texture, until there was no more He-Man in sight, but only Adam. "Oh, Adam!" cried Teela, as Evelyn staggered back in defeat that almost cost her life. Adam was drained of strength. He felt weak, and knew he needed the sword back to change into He-Man again and renew his strength. He started to make his way towards Skeletor to take the sword back, but all his minions were on his way. Fighting them cost him to diminish his already depleted strength, until finally, when it was only he and Skeletor left, he was too weak to fight. He collapsed at Skeletor's feet, and with almost inaudible voice he cried, "Run, Teela, run. I cannot protect you anymore. If you love me, you will run and save yourself." It was hard for Teela to do what Adam demanded. She had never ran away from battle before, never ran in fear. She wanted to stay and die fighting the enemies with him if that's what it takes. She was a brave warrior, and it's innate in her to fight, but her love for him was stronger than any will she possessed. "Adam, I can't. I love you," she uttered in helpless emotion. "Do as I say," he demanded angrily. Tears started streaming down Teela's eyes as she stood tormented, whether to go or stay. "If you die, Then everything I did to save you was for naught, said Adam gently. Teela couldn't bear to disappoint him any further, and hurt him any more than she already did. With tears streaming down her eyes, she ran to escape before Skeletor could catch her. Metout. Chapter 11. Skeletor's triumphant laughter reverberated throughout Snake Mountain. He ordered He-Man, now Prince Adam, to be locked up in the dungeon while they prepared to attack King Randor's castle and invade Eternia as its new ruler. Adam was slumped on the cold stone floor of the dark dungeon. He felt completely drained of energy, but he knew that a slight touch from his sword would restore his superhuman strength. He wondered about Teela. He didn't know she had it in her to be impulsive, but the dictates of the heart are oftentimes unreasonable. He didn't love her any less. In fact, he loved her more for risking her life for him, thinking he was in grave danger. It was amusing how he sometimes felt jealous of his alter ego, He-Man thinking Teela preferred him more, only to have them in a predicament resulted by Teela's defiance towards He-Man in order to save Adam. He knew she was smart and capable and would be able to escape back to the castle and ask for reinforcement. He knew he was at the end of his rope. They would all know now that Prince Adam and He-Man are one and the same, now that his secret is out. When they get out of this jam alive, the first thing he'll do is marry Teela regardless of what everyone deemed appropriate. The moon shone brilliantly from her balcony. Now that the heavy storm had died down, Bo took the liberty to push open the French window leading to the balcony to give Adora a better view of the 1,000 sparkling stars amidst the black velvet night. It might somehow appease her tumultuous emotions. He stepped out and admired the sky and enjoyed the cool breeze. He leaned his back on the balcony railing and looked at his soon-to-be wife, seated at the edge of the bed, wiping the corner of her eyes with a pink handkerchief. Though she hid it from the public's eye, he knew she was worried about his brother. She was tough, as everyone knew her to be, but she couldn't help being a sister, couldn't help emotions getting the better of her at times, and she never let anybody else witness those moments but him. It was almost midnight, and he shouldn't be visiting her chambers at this hour, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her in her state of emotions just for propriety reasons. They were never alone in their quarters back in Etheria. They were a big family in the Great Rebellion. She was often with Glimmer, or Flutterina, or the other girls while he was busy planning strategies with Seahawk and the other warriors. They never really had some privacy, but here in her family's enormous castle, he suddenly found himself alone with her, at a time when she most needed him. He wanted to enfold her in his arms and kiss away the tears and the worries she felt, but he was afraid he won't be able to stop at that. For years he had his emotions at rein, never even gave her more than a chaste kiss, but looking at her vulnerable state, he couldn't help himself. He loved her so much he wanted to make everything right for her. Slowly he walked back into the room and sat beside her on the bed. He draped his arm around her, and she rested her here at the crook of his neck. "Darling, you said so yourself. Adam is an excellent warrior. Stop torturing yourself. He'll be fine," reassured Bo as he drew her closer. "Oh, Bo, I'm not only worried about his safety. I'm worried for everyone who's depending on him. Our parents, Eternia. I'm so worried. I wish I could tell you," said Adora as her voice trailed off. Bo drew her to face him. "Tell me what, Adora?" Adora stood up and walked to the open balcony, but remained silent. Married people shouldn't have secrets. Well, they aren't married yet, reasoned, but they'll soon be, she rationalized. She wanted so much to tell him everything, but it didn't only involve her. It involved his brother. She was torn between honesty towards her soon-to-be husband and loyalty to her brother. She shivered a little from the cold. Bo came up behind her and enfolded her into a tight embrace to keep her warm. He kissed her temple and drew her tighter to his body. "Sometimes I feel you are hiding something from me. Is there something bothering you, Adora? At times you look at me like you wanted to talk about some important matter, but then you would blink, and that look is gone. You have me confused sometimes, darling," said Bo as he affectionately nibbled the side of her face. Adora knew it was now or never, but she just didn't have the guts. She didn't even know where to begin. She loved him very much. She thought holding a secret would deter her from falling in love. from living a normal life. But it didn't. Bo was different. She believed he would understand her responsibilities as She-Ra. She believed him man enough to accept and not be threatened by her powers. But why couldn't she tell him the secret she'd been carrying for years? He was waiting for her response, and she didn't know what to say except show him she loved him with all her being. She turned back to face him. She looked into the pool of his dark blue eyes, the shade of the evening sky outside the balcony. "I love you. No matter what happens, know that I love you," she whispered, before descending her soft red lips on his for a long, lingering kiss. Bo was startled for a moment at her unusual forwardness, but as soon as he felt the willingness of her kiss, he lost all his senses and carried her to the bed. He cupped her face between his hands as he deepened the kiss, leaving Adora breathless and hungry for air, but managed only with what little air she could take from him. Her heart was beating wildly. Had she bitten more than she could chew? A part of her wanted him to stop. A part of her was thrilled and excited. She felt delirious. He had never kissed her that way before. It was full of hunger and passion. She tried to push him away, but he felt heavy and relentless. Suddenly, she knew how it felt to be powerless, to lose control. She was slowly falling into the tangled web of their desire. They inadvertently left the balcony door open, and the wind was blowing against the moonlight that fell across the bedroom. Yet Adora didn't feel any chill. She fluttered her eyes open a few hours later and found herself snugly nestled into the warm, massive, naked body of Bo, his even breathing close to her ear, his arms tightly wrapped around her, as though he didn't want to let her go. She felt a little guilty for having the most wonderful night of her life, just when she didn't know where her brother was there. Sleep seemed to evade her for a long time. She only hoped and prayed her brother will find. Chapter 12. Teela didn't want to waste time trekking back to the castle, when time might be of the essence and a slight delay may mean Adam's demise. She wiped her tears at the back of her hand. There was no use crying now. She felt really foolish. She couldn't believe her foolhardiness had caused great harm to the man she loved. How was she to know that they were one and the same? She scolded herself for not knowing. She heard that if you love someone, you have a great instinct about them, and she hated herself for not feeling that Adam was He-Man. Teela knew she was outnumbered by Skeletor's minions who were on her trail, and the last time she checked, they were closing in on her. She couldn't slay all of them before returning back to Skeletor's domain, could she? She must find a way to sidetrack them so she could hurriedly go back to help Adam. She felt apprehension at the pit of her stomach. What if she blew it again? Should she just run to the castle and ask her father for help? Before she could weigh things, she heard them fast approaching. She immediately hid in a small crevice on the mountain, behind some huge rocks. As she heard them rush past her one by one, she uttered a silent prayer that they wouldn't find her. When she thought that all had passed her hiding place, she slowly sneaked out only to be confronted by one minion who was left behind. They fought until Teela defeated him by throwing him off the cliff, however. Teela lost her footing and began to fall after her enemy. She bravely clawed for some protruding rock to break her fall, until she realized she didn't need to, for she was not falling anymore. Battle Cat caught the hem of her clothing when she fell past him on a lower deck of the mountain. He settled her back at her feet and roared. "Battle Cat, am I glad to see you?" cried Teela. "Come on, let's go. We've got to save He-Man," said Battle Cat. As they resumed their trek up the steep mountain, Teela spoke. "There's something you need to know, Battle Cat. He is no longer He-Man. He was turned back to Adam. We must help him get his sword back," said Teela. When they reached the inner recesses of Snake Mountain, where Adam was held captive, they saw that there were only a few minions left to guard him, as most of them went with Skeletor to attack the king's palace. Adam looked better than he did a few hours back. He had almost recuperated from the severe battle she had with Evil Lyn. His facial expression still looked exhausted, but he was pacing back and forth inside his cell. He was held captive not by ordinary iron bars, but by laser bars. He knew crossing them would burn him, or worse, disintegrate his human body. Perhaps if he was He-Man, his sword would certainly dispel the beams. "This is a piece of cake. I can take them with one hand, boasted Teela, eyeing the 20 or so handful of minions in the area. Emu, I have a better idea to save time. I'll lure them over there and fight with them while you get Adam out, then we'll meet up, suggested Battle Cat. Every single one of Adam's guards fell blindly into their plan and fought Battle Cat. Adam! Called Teela as she excitedly approached his cell. Wait, stop! Warned Adam as she approached the laser beams. Take off your headdress, commanded Adam. Teela looked at him in confusion but obeyed. Her long auburn tresses went cascading down her back as she pulled off her headdress. Hold it right through the rays to prevent the rays from the top to reach the bottom. Hold until I can make my escape, explained Adam. Are you sure that's going to work? Asked Teela. Of course it will. Titanium is strong enough to thwart the beams, said Adam. Teela did as she was instructed. Her headdress managed to impede 2 rays, allowing a gap for escape. But Adam, it's too small. We need a bigger titanium to impede at least 4 rays for you to fit, she said with trepidation. There's not enough time. I guess I just would have to do with what we've got, said Adam before squeezing himself into the small gap. Teela couldn't look. She held on to the headdress but closed her eyes and prayed. She hated to think what might happen if Adam hit the rays. Teela's eyes were still shut when she felt warm and tender lips fastened over hers on a lingering kiss. She gasped and flew her eyes open without loosening her hold on the headdress. Adam's life depended on it. She dropped her headdress and snaked her fingers through the golden blonde hair, pushing Adam's head to deepen the kiss. He kissed her hungrily that Teela almost lost her breath. Before he lost control, Adam reluctantly pulled away. Teela was too intoxicated by the kiss she would have fallen if Adam wasn't holding her shoulders. We have to go, said Adam. His strong, authoritative voice brought Teela to her senses. Only then did she realize that Adam was bleeding. He had several gashes on his shoulder, back and thigh where the beam hit him on his way out the small gap. His wounds looked terrible that tears burst into Teela's eyes. You're terribly hurt, and you didn't even flinch, she cried, touching the blood from his chest. If only she could take away his pain. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If not for me, this wouldn't have happened to you, she cried. Adam held her face between his hands and dried her tears with his thumb. He kissed her tenderly on the eyelids, on the tip of her nose and on her lips. All is forgiven. You didn't know, he whispered. I just feel so guilty, said Teela. One day I'll collect what you owe me, kidded Adam before pulling her out of Skeletor's place. By the way, how'd you know my headdress is titanium? Asked Teela suspiciously as Adam half dragged her out. Lucky guess, he replied. He didn't want to reveal how he took it, just so he could see her with her hair loose. Soon they rejoined Battle Cat and headed back to the castle. Teela sat behind Adam as they rode Battle Cat. She laid her head on his firm, broad back and wrapped her arms around his waist. As they treaded back to the castle, her gesture brought a smile on Adam's face, lessening his worry about the castle and his family. What's your father going to say when he sees you making a pass at the prince? Joked Adam. Teela smiled and slapped his back playfully. Playing a pass at the prince? You stole a kiss from me, she retorted. Adam's grin widened, which Teela couldn't see. He just loved to tease her. He always wanted to, but never managed. She was often too serious. He was afraid his jokes might appear in bad taste for her. Don't worry. I'll give you back the kiss I've stolen, said Adam. Or would you want it now? He continued, teasing her. Teela blushed and took her hands off Adam. She was glad he couldn't see her face. It was a rough road and she almost slipped. Whoa, take it easy, said Adam as he steadied Teela. Hold on to me, he commanded. What? And have myself accused of making a pass at the prince? No way. I can manage, she uttered proudly. He touched Battle Cat to halt him for a minute. He went down, and to Teela's surprise, he lifted her down. Ahata, hey, she managed to utter. If you don't want to hold me, fine. You seat in front and I'll hold you. he said in a tone that told Teela he was not entertaining any arguments. The minute they started again, Teela knew seating in front of him was not a good idea. Her heart was beating double time. She was afraid Adam could hear it. She could feel his hard chest against her bare back, his masculine heat, intoxicating her. Adam's hand held her firmly just below her ribcage, which was slowly driving her hot all over. Teela gasped as she suddenly felt Adam's fingers toying with the little laces between her breasts. Did she imagine that? Or was the brush of his fingers just an accident? The laces were not holding her top together. Even if it became undone, she will not be naked. It was only a design. But still his fingers were making her disconcerted. Suddenly she knew it was no accident, and she didn't imagine it. His fingers managed to loosen the lace and found its way gently inside her dress. His forefinger stroked her nipple, which shot 100 volts to her unsuspecting body. "Adam?" she cried as she looked up to him questioningly. But that's all she managed to utter before his lips fastened on her, his fingers continually doing his magic on her. Her hands were atop his. She needed to stop him. If he decided to take her now in the forest with Battlecat watching, she will not be able to stop him. She was on fire. She could hardly breathe. Then just as sudden, Adam freed her ravished lips. His smoldering eyes were looking intently into hers, his fingers still touching her. "And so, when this battle with Skeletor is over, I'm collecting payment." Teela was left speechless at his words. She felt a shiver right up her spine, and a hunger deep within her. "And that is promise," he whispered, before sealing it with a little peck on her cheek. Chapter 13. Adora felt she had just closed her eyes when there was a frantic pounding at her door. She must have slumbered so deep that she wasn't sure how long the pounding had been going. Princess Adora! It was Duncan, and it sounded like a big emergency. She suddenly sat up in a jolt, disoriented for a moment, until she became aware of the man who suddenly sat up in surprise as well. His arm was still draped over her, and the sheet slipped a little, reminding her of her nakedness and the glorious night they spent together. "Oh, Princess? Princess!" shouted Duncan as he pounded the door. They were both speechless for a moment as the frantic pounding continued. Bo cursed and stood up to cover Adora, who was still unsure about what to do. He never wanted to compromise her. She was their princess, and he hated himself for allowing her to be stuck in this situation. He started pulling up his breeches. Jumping from the window did cross his mind. Then he scolded himself to be a man, and just face her father's right-hand man, who was forcefully banging on the door. So, before Adora could speak up to pacify the forceful knock, the door swung open, and Man-at-Arms was stunned at the sight that welcomed him when he walked into the room. He didn't expect to find Bo in the princess's room. No wonder he was not in his room when he tried to locate him first. "I beg your pardon, Princess Adora. I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't an emergency. We are being invaded by the forces of Skeletor, and I was worried something might have happened to you when there was no answer." They looked at each other in secret, understanding that it was a job for She-Ra. "Have you found Adam?" she asked. Man-at-Arms sadly shook his head for a moment, then in a flicker regained his confident stance. "We must hurry before Skeletor enters the castle," he said. "Attacked by Skeletor. I'm on my way, Duncan," replied Bo. A rush of adrenaline filled his body as he grabbed his weapon and kissed the stunned Adora before joining the others to defend the castle. Duncan rushed after Bo. There was no time for further apologies or for any lecture. Adora wasn't his daughter, but he somehow felt like reprimanding her great warrior fiancé. Perhaps it wasn't his place, albeit he is her father's trusted right hand. How many times had he been worried that he would open his daughter Teela's room and find Prince Adam in there? It was one of his fears, for he wouldn't know what to do if he found them in such a compromising state. He may be a bit old and old-fashioned, but he wasn't blind to the sparks between his daughter and the prince. He was just afraid that Teela might end up being hurt, and he wouldn't allow that. His loyalty was to the royal family, but his love for his daughter would always prevail. When they reached the courtyard, everything was in total chaos, as they fired their ammunitions to prevent Skeletor and his minions from entering the castle gates. The king and queen remained inside the castle with Madame Raz and Orko to keep them company, while the Great Rebellion and Duncan's men were battling the forces of Skeletor. Skeletor was standing on his floating spaceship, laughing in triumph as he gave orders. He believed that since he had Prince Adam locked up and have his sword confiscated, he couldn't turn into He-Man to protect the kingdom. But his laughter was short-lived, when right beside him dashed a flying unicorn and beautiful blonde lady warrior that caused him to lose his balance, almost falling overboard had he not held on to the spaceship when he toppled over. "Why, you nincompoop? Who are you? What? It can't be!" yelled Skeletor in disbelief as he regained his balance back to the flying spaceship. "Of course it's possible, Skeletor. It's me, She-Ra, and I will not let you take over Eternia," she declared. "I will get you, She-Ra, just as I have defeated He-Man," yelled Skeletor, and he aimed a laser beam at her, but she dispelled it with her sword. She-Ra was aghast. "What do you mean? Where is He-Man?" "It's too late. You cannot save him, and I will kill you, She-Ra," said Skeletor, and he threw her another beam, which she managed to avoid, despite his unnerving statement about He-Man. She threw him her own laser that came from her sword. She-Ra and Swiftwind flew around Skeletor in circles, as She-Ra continued to try and bring him down with her sword. "Look! Up there! It's She-Ra!" exclaimed Castaspella. "It is she. I can't believe she's here. I thought she was in Etheria," said Glimmer. "She is fighting with Skeletor." "Where is He-Man?" asked Bo, as he shot one of the enemies with his arrow. "I don't know where he is, and neither do Duncan and everyone in the castle," cried Glimmer. Skeletor was getting dizzy with She-Ra's tactics. Feeling he was losing the battle, he pulled out He-Man's sword and dispelled She-Ra's attack. More surprised than hurt, She-Ra fell to the ground a few yards from Bo. "She-Ra!" he exclaimed, as he swiftly caught a blow that Beastman threw at She-Ra the moment she fell to the ground. She-Ra was still stunned at the sight of He-Man's sword in the hands of Skeletor, that she couldn't say a word. It didn't even sink in that she was almost terribly hurt by Beastman. After defeating Beastman, Bo was immediately helping her to her feet. "Are you all right? What's the matter?" Bo asked She-Ra. "My brother. He's got He-Man's sword," She-Ra uttered almost hysterically. Before Bo could decipher exactly what She-Ra was saying, Skeletor's flying machine came down to the courtyard. "That's right, She-Ra. I have He-Man's sword because he's dead, and now I shall rule Eternia," he cried in evil hysteria. She-Ra launched at him in fury. "You killed my brother!" Strong emotions made her unfocused, and before she knew what was happening, Skeletor fastened his magical glowing collar around her neck, triggering her powerless until she fell on her knees in front of him. She-Ra couldn't understand why she suddenly felt so weak. She couldn't even stand. Everything around her started dancing until she felt the world was dissolving and spinning around her. She glanced about, trying to look for a familiar face for help. If she wasn't mistaken, her fiancé was just somewhere near, but she couldn't see him amidst the blurry dancing figures. She tried to reach out to someone, anyone, but she felt so weak she sprawled to the ground. Maybe she just needed to rest, and everything was going to be fine. Skeletor laughed hysterically in triumph as She-Ra lay sprawled back to the ground, almost lifeless. And slowly, like magic, her appearance started to change until it looked nothing but a helpless young girl, with straight sunshine blonde hair, barely breathing. The warrior princess was gone. Her sword lay beside her on the ground. It was a big shock to Bo to suddenly find his fiancée lying helpless on the ground. He knew his eyes must playing tricks on him, another one of Skeletor's schemes, but he couldn't take a chance. He must save her. As the conceited bag of bones continued to laugh, Bo shot an arrow and hit him squarely on the chest. His hysterical laughter stopped as pain took over his body, but not enough to defeat him. Bo rushed to take Adora from the feet of the wounded Skeletor, and as he turned his back to bring Adora inside the castle, Skeletor saw it as an opportunity to kill him with the sword. He raised his arm, but before he could plunge the sword, someone stopped him. "Bo, look out!" cried Adam as he caught Skeletor's arm before he could harm Bo. Adam, thank you, said Bo before taking Adora away from the fighting men. No, what are you doing here? Screamed Skeletor in surprise. Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not letting you take over Eternia, and you have something that belongs to me, said He-Man as he grabbed his sword from Skeletor's back, and before everyone's eyes he yelled, "By the power of Grayskull!" Everyone stared in amazement in that magical transformation moment. As soon as Adam became He-Man, Skeletor stood no chance in their sword fight. Within a few minutes of fighting, He-Man managed to wound Skeletor severely, that he dropped She-Ra's sword in pain. He-Man smugly walked to where She-Ra's sword fell from Skeletor's hand and picked it up. Said. He stared at Skeletor kneeled on one knee, grimacing in pain from his wounds. "Ninannan, you must admit that was quite a fight you gave Skeletor, but it's time for you to go home." Realizing that he was momentarily defeated, Skeletor hopped into his flying spaceship. "I'll get you, He-Man. Someday I'll kill you, and your sister She-Ra too," he yelled before his spaceship sped off. Bo cradled Adora in his arms. She looked so weak. "Oh God, don't let her die," he silently prayed. He knew he must run back to the courtyard and help everyone in fighting Skeletor, but he couldn't find it in his heart to leave her. Adora looked into Bo's sad brown eyes. She wished she could read what was on his mind at the moment. "I'm sorry, Bo. I should have told you about my secret," whispered Adora, as she traced his face with her fingertips. He drew her closer. "Hush. Don't worry about that. You must conserve your strength. I must admit it was a shock. But no matter who or what you are, and even if you had 101 secrets, I would still love you, Adora." Although she felt weak, Adora managed a smile. "I'm glad you're not mad." Bo tried to remove the glowing collar, but it was indestructible. He became increasingly worried, as it might finally kill Adora. But he didn't want her to think of that. He tried to hide his fear with a little joke and affection. "Hey, after you feel better, I expect you to make it up to me for keeping that secret from me." He winked. "Can that wait till after the wedding?" She gave a faint smile. Talking seemed a feat for her. It almost broke Bo's heart. He must find a way to tear this damn collar. A huge shadow suddenly cast on them. Bo looked up and found He-Man offering a comforting smile. "I have something that belongs to you, dear sister," said He-Man. "But first I must remove this thing from your neck." Effortlessly, He-Man tore the glowing collar from Adora's neck, and in no time she felt as good as new. When all her strength and faculties was restored, Adora got up and gave his brother a big hug. "Thank you, Adam." "I thought you'd never come," she said. He-Man turned himself back to Adam and handed his sister's sword back to her. "Everything's back to normal, sis, and we can now focus on the wedding." He smiled.